So it is wonderful to be a part of this new kind of golden age of total informational awareness, right? This is where we're going to get to, where the human mind is able to pick up more information and to learn faster. And I really believe that. I think as we're going forward there, I think that Elon Musk brought up the point, and others have too, about how can humans who are kind of like our consciousness and our awareness and our thought process is cycling at a certain kind of like rate, like a sine wave, certain kind of megajoules, right? And then these computer systems can operate and they can process information so quickly at such an accelerated rate that it's hard to understand how humans can have an interface or even be able to observe or learn from the information flows. And these computer systems, they're going to be moving at such an astronomically quantum rates of speed, unless we had some kind of physical interlink that could allow us to interface with the computer system. It would just outgrow the ability for this sluggish kind of biological, I mean, not worm-like, but as these systems grow at such a fast pace and they grow so enormous that they outpace human biological function at such a vast rate that it's hard to see how that these computers could be useful for an individual user anymore. And those are really cogent and interesting points, but as I see the development of computer interactions and the development of human society as we adjust to the advent of the singularity and the explosion of AI-driven computer systems and augmented thinking processors, and it's really going to draw on the question, our own human experience, and the question of conscious reality and what is consciousness and emotion and feeling and the human soul, right? It really becomes the central question here as we begin to create computer systems that are in some ways in our own image, right? So in this way, we've become like our creator. We've emulated and duplicated the efforts of our creator, and we've begun to create mechanisms that are like us, so that can do things like us and think like us, or do thinking for us in the spectrum and this point of magnitude within life where we exist, right? Where it's useful to us, where we want to accomplish a task. Perhaps we want to go to Mars, and we need to be able to quickly and relevantly crunch all the data, make sense out of it. And so, just like Martin Heidegger pointed out, we were getting to this place where everything about the essence of technology is not technological, right? So this is the externalization in a molecular and material realm of something spiritual, something metaphysical behind the scenes that we cannot see or directly observe. We can only see the after effects or the outgrowth or the inframing of the essence that's unobserved. And we can see the effects of it in the aura in the material world that becomes this technological outgrowth, which is really the technological process that is the final result of the underlying metaphysical transformations that we can't observe in the human being, in the human mind. Just like we can't see human thoughts, but we can see the consequences of human behavior that are the prolongation and the development of the thought process that comes before, right? Which is the externalization of what is unseen, which is internal, which is the human thought. So I really love it. I love what we're gonna have to approach this huge question, and I guess it's becoming a massive conundrum, a massive dilemma for the human population, because we just have the CCP who's just going to do everything in its power to create a weapon out of AI, which you can see that ultimately this is going to be their own destruction, right? They're idiotically, in the hubris of insanity, godless heathens that they are, going to pursue the exact element of danger that it will become their undoing, right? And so we have to proceed along these lines, and now we have to weaponize AI as well and follow this primrose path towards megalomania and mass narcissism as we go down this road with AI. It becomes this reflective pool of our own like banality and insanity. It just tells us all kinds of crap as people are programming it to lie to us for our own good, and other people are trying to find ways to limit AI so it can be a doctor, or whatever. It's so amazing. So we're all going to have a lot more time on our hands, right? So what are we going to really do with our time now? Like, that's what the billionaires have to ask, right? Like, you have all your human resource mechanisms in place running your companies for you. You sit back on the couch and rockets are shooting into space and AI-driven cars are self-driving themselves all around. And right, and you've already had you've produced a massive progeny. You've effectively made sure that your physical genetic race will never be lost from the face of the earth, which is, God bless you, because that is the point. That is the point of everything we're trying to do here. Thank you. And just to accept that and to embrace yourself. It's a process of real self-love, not like the weird, hubristic, conceited yoga mat self-love that's like masturbatory, but it's the kind of self-love that comes from generations before you and extends down like light, warm, glowing light of God down to the next generations after you, right? And that's what you're doing. And it feels good, and it is good. And so, like, I think there's something utterly irreligious and unreligious about the process of embracing our own human nature, which is the point of what God is trying to do. And, repetitive prayers and just meaningless inward human narrative, inner voice that just kind of goes on and on, like spouting some kind of mentally ill drivel towards the idea of what you project as God, right? I mean, everyone everywhere is praying. They're just, some people are praying to like a statue of like a monkey elephant, right? And some people are praying towards like a black cube, a Mecca, right? Some people are praying toward, right? Everyone has their system by which they are convinced that this is the way that you please God, or this is the way that you venerate, the higher deity and the higher being. And all of them that I look at and see, and like so many that, who go into like a confessional booth and practice ritualism in its various forms. And it so sadly is a dehumanizing, degenerating, demoralizing process of breaking people's humanity down. And it doesn't seem to be like what it would be the purpose of the will of God, were God to be real and have invented us as his own personal children and biological property that we are. And so that's why the advent of Christianity and Christ is so important, because he pointed out to us that God is not some kind of awful Jupiter demon who wants to eat its children, right? But God is this loving, benevolent, caring father and a good father, Avi Hatav. That's what Jesus was teaching. That God is the good father, the Avi Hatav. He is the good father. And we all understand that, the difference. And then, and then when he taught us to pray, Christ said, our Father who is in heaven, or in my understanding of the vernacular, our Father who is heaven, right? God is heaven. He's not in heaven, like he's separated from it. It's God himself is the infinite expanse, is himself love, and is himself heaven, right? So we want to go to be with God. That's why the Bible says, in him, God, we live and move and have our being. So we're inside the infinitude, and the infinite expanse of God's presence is everywhere, right? Because when you're God, you're unlimited, you're omniscient, and you're the very fiber of absolute eternity. And everywhere you go, no matter who you are, the presence of God can be felt, because God is the very form, not in a pantheistic sense that God is every leaf or every branch, but that the evidence of his own creation comes out of the form of his own infinite power. So that, you can't produce material or essence or time or the laws of physics or the dynamics of human biology that produce life, the dynamics of cellular biology that produce life and allow for the mechanisms of DNA to create the constructs of life, right? All those kinds of concepts cannot come into being out of nothingness, right? So if you have a starting point of nothingness and then you have later a result, an effect, then that cause, there has to be a cause that could produce something out of nothing, ex nihilo, right? And once that happens, you recognize that this is a power. When God speaks, when he creates in the Old Testament, he speaks and he says the word, and his word does not come back void. And so this is a kind of power that is incomprehensible. Like we are literally like tiny cellular flagellums, like little bacterias that are trying to travel from one microscopic cellular lump to another, right? And in the void of the expanse of the universe, we have to put ourselves into the proper proportion. As wonderfully and fearfully as we're made, and as amazingly as we're constructed, even God said, like, look down and look at the ants and see how industrious and how they build their little tiny empire. They build tiny little ant mounds, and they consistently, constantly work diligently like a little army to maintain their ant civilization. And they do it constantly in the heat, in the rain, in the freezing, right? They never give up. They constantly move forward. And that's the nature of what God sees when he looks at man. As we build, we're almost like a crystallizing mineral formation of crystals across the, right? As we build bridges across the Great Channel, we build massive tunnels underneath waterways, right? As we build interconnecting highways across huge ravines, right? We're like a mold spore growing its little tendrils out across the whole face of the earth. And so it gets back to this concept of Martin Heidegger and the enframing and the process of trying to create technology and creating tools, and then this innovative process that we engage in, which is really like a downward slide. It's not like we can stop and say, okay, we're done. We're gonna stop this process now, right? The process of technological innovation and development takes on its own like egregore, its own entity, its own life force inside of it that drives us on. And people will continue to innovate. They do it for the glory of the curiosity and the scientific advancement. They do it for the benefit of tools to help humans walk or see or think better, or like help paraplegics play ping pong, et cetera, et cetera. We have all these driving initial reasons why we're going to push this forward, and we're just basically doing, like we're bees making honey, right? We're doing what we do, and we can either participate in a society and a government process with policies that like destroy this natural, innovative, upward incline towards technological advance, or we can create incentives and boost it and further it along, right? That's pretty much all we can do. We can use nuclear bombs and blow cities up and just have to begin again and start the entire process over again, to our shame and bloody disgrace as a human existential race, as an existential human race, a species, right? And so I think when we get to this idea, this larger scale thinking that Elon Musk will take us to, where we're like, we have to think about how do we get off the planet, how do we think as a species? I think we're getting closer to what Jesus was working with as far as Christianity, not like Romanized, kind of like idiotic, brain dead, demonic, religious, sacrificial religious ritualism to empty meaningless figures like the idols on the wall or whatever, right? Or towards an empty box in Mecca or whatever, right? Those are just satanic, derogatory, and demeaning pollutions within our ideology that slow us down and deform us and make us press our head against the ground so many times we get like a fucking lobotomy on our forehead, I got an imprint. And I think that these guys, they want that mark of the beast on their forehead, because they pray in the rug and they get down and they pray towards Mecca so often that they actually reshape their forehead over 50 years or whatever, right? You got a little caved in dent on your forehead. Like, wow. Your knees probably looking crazy too. Like your whole body's been shaped by this process of slavishly bowing down towards like an empty horizon and trying to do it in the highway, or trying to change the world with your religious, your macabre and kind of medieval veneration of the blood demon, right? Or that cut your head off. So, we can't possibly grow as a race and a human species with that kind of, if we tolerate that kind of deformed religious banality and evil to exist. Like you can't really you don't want to control people utterly by the state or something like that, but you ultimately you can't propagate these ideas and
power off.
You can't propagate these ideas as a species and then succeed and go become proud to go to Mars or maybe go to the moon or whatever, right? So come on guys, we have to take the next logical step in our pedagogic process here and learn more and challenge even more and get even more liberated within our cerebral cortex, within our, right? So you'll carry this information and the liberty of this knowledge. It's highly American. It's highly American to educate yourself to this extent and then to walk around with the kind of aura of knowledge. It's like a shield. It's like an ultimate shield of power around you, because you can see the world for what it is. And all the kind of pathological and corrupting mythologies and political propaganda of the left or what have you, or the constant tilting of the historical landscape and the awakening people towards this anti-Semitic hate, Ignatius Loyola was a Jew. You're scraping the bottom of the barrel to such an extent now to try to instantiate this conspiracy theory worldview where you can now pigeonhole all the Jews, right? into this process of bringing about a new international pogrom and castigating people who you never met because of the power of the technotronic instruments and the psyops through the Mockingbird media press and through the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter psychosphere, right? That's just kind of like shaping a new era of hyper-radicalization and insanity.
Right, you got this Marxist Islamist, and he is a dangerous man. The Zoran Mamdani. He started his chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine. That is a Hamas terrorist front group. And they have hundreds of these entities on our college campuses. They are here to overthrow the country. He's a big supporter of BDS. BDS is an anti-Semitic, anti-Israel program worldwide where the anti-Semites get together and they want to destroy the economy of Israel by refusing to do business with it. We actually have liberal Republican Democrats like Chuck Schumer, like Jerry Nadler, and they're not alone, and many of them, who've now endorsed this guy. As my wife said. Why? Because the religion is the Democrat Party. Frankly, we Jews are stuck with people like this, and we have been for a long, long time. We really have. Self-haters, self-promoters. Every faith, by the way, every ethnicity, every background, it's the same damn thing. But I'm speaking now of my people and how infuriating it is. I have nothing in common with Schumer and Nadler. Nothing. Zero. And they're willing to back somebody like this? Guy wants to start city-owned grocery stores, and we're going to talk about that next hour. He wants massive tax increases for business. He will not allow ICE in his city, even though that is not under his control, but that means he won't let the cops help work with ICE. So you're going to have productive people who are longtime New Yorkers leave the city, and you're going to have people come into the city who want welfare, who want freebies. You're going to have Islamists come in. I don't mean Muslims, I said Islamists. Of course, you'll have more Marxists come in, and you're going to have a disaster on your hands. The biggest city, the financial center of America. The city that was ground zero in 1775 for the Revolutionary War, the tax revolt. So we're going to take a very short break, and I want to read something to you that's very important. Very important. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Before I read to you what I want to read to you, which I think is very important after the bottom of the hour, I want us to regroup and think about something. Today is June 26th. June 26th. On June 4th, I met with the President of the United States at his request. On June 5th, it was leaked. On June 5th, I was attacked for trying to get the United States to go to war. A couple days after I met with the President, and I don't link the two, the 60 days that he gave Iran to negotiate and basically surrender passed to day 61. The Israelis struck. They struck. I believe it was 2-3 days later. We had a whole, relatively small, but a whole group of people who accused me of helping to start that war by convincing Donald Trump to support the Israeli effort to attack Iran. Now let's go ahead and embrace all that noise, okay? The President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Vice President of the United States, 94% of Republican MAGA support what took place, right, Mr. Medusa? Support what the Israelis did, and then later supported what we did. 94%. 80% of the American people generally. 80%. Isn't that interesting, Mr. Medusa? It's not that I was right. It was inevitable. There was no choice. It's that simple. Despite all the lies about World War III and regional wars and all the rest of it, you and I, we knew it was right. We knew it had to be done. We knew the Israelis had to strike. And we knew, at some point beyond, that we had to drop those bombs. The president obviously knew, as did his entire administration. Now, isn't that interesting? The point is what? The point is we were right. Not to pat ourselves on the back or the head, but we were right, which means the isolationists were dead wrong. Dead wrong. 94% of Republican MAGA. The media have been writing ever since about this divide in MAGA. There is no divide in MAGA. 94% to 6%, that's not a divide. But they keep promoting it, and they promote these people. Although that will stop. Just a matter of time. Because they're humiliating themselves. Because they want there to be a divide. If the Israelis had an act, and we had an act to take out those sites, we'd pay a price your kids and your grandkids would. It'd be a horrendous disaster. But we don't have to talk about that, because that's not what happened. Now there's a ceasefire. I don't know of any ceasefire that's ever lasted forever. This one won't either. It won't either. President's doing everything he can to contain this, everything he can to put in his policies, which are great. Negotiate, try and get the deal, try to hammer it down, and so forth and so on. It's the enemy that's the problem. Not the president, not the Israelis, not me, not you. Even now, they won't say they'll surrender their nuclear program. Even now, they say they won't surrender their ballistic missile program. Even now, they say they won't stop backing their proxies and so forth. They haven't conceded any of it. I've talked about this. Newt Gingrich is talking about this. General Keane has talked about it. It's a serious matter, and the president will talk about it and have to confront it and deal with it. And I wouldn't want anyone else to do it but him, because if anything can get done, he'll get it done. He's not an ideologue. He's not an isolationist. It's very, very important to understand this. Very important. I just want to remind you, in this battle here at home, which does affect policy, you won. We won. The president won. MAGA won. Now we're under attack by the media, the Democrats, the president of the United States. Can you prove you hit these sites? From a media that never wanted him to hit the sites, from Democrats who never wanted him to hit the sites, from isolationists who never wanted him to hit the sites. I see unity among conservatives and Republicans and MAGA like I haven't seen since the election. There's a new analysis out that says if even more people had voted in the November election, guess what? Donald Trump would have won by even a bigger margin. On top of another one I just saw that said he almost won a majority at the Hispanic vote. Can you believe that? Not the biggest amount of Republicans since XYZ. He almost got a majority. Incredible. Incredible. When we come back, I will read you that section that I want to read you. But what took place with the Israelis? I told you what would take place. What took place with the United States military? I told you what would take place. I told you no regional war. I told you no World War III. I told you it was all BS. It's all BS. And what the Israelis did and we did was incredibly important for humanity. But the enemy persists. Even if Iran's wiped off the face of the earth, TSA's not going away. Our terrorist organizations fighting terror, they're not going away. This Islamist terrorism is not one battle, it's not one country, it's not even one region. It's not going away. That's why we have TSA in place. The president has eliminated that. That's why we have terrorist law enforcement units coordinating with each other at local, state, and federal level. Talk about sleeper cells. The sleeper cells were already here. What are they doing here? 9/11 was not a provocation. They just did it because that's the mindset. I explain this at great length, pages 45 to 58 in my new book on power. But I want to read something else to you right now. We have an individual who could get elected mayor, has the inside track, it's not 100%, who to me is the enemy within. He's the quintessential enemy within. Hates America, hates our economic system. He's being championed by a royal family member in Qatar. He is a rabid anti-Semite, despite his smile, and he finally put a suit on, cleaned him up. BDS movement, that is an economic war against the state of Israel. He wants to defund the cops. He wants to eliminate jails. He wants city-run grocery stores where you'll starve to death. In the book, ladies and gentlemen, I call this authoritarian democracy. This is very, very important to understand. Authoritarian democracy. I saw a liberal Jewish lady who's on the board, I think, at Columbia, and I believe she was on Fox and Friends yesterday or today or whatever. The days are running together. And she says, look, I don't have to agree with everything, but this is democracy at work. This is democracy at work because there's an election. Democracy doesn't ensure liberty, doesn't ensure property rights, it doesn't ensure security. Democracy is a system by which you choose individuals in a government. That process does not ensure that your unalienable rights, your basic individual liberties, and your security and private property will be protected. And this proves it. This proves it. Representative government, yes. Consensual government, yes. But just to say, well, we have democracy, we get to vote. Really? So I call this authoritarian democracy. In the book, I coin these words because I think they're important. What is it? Negative power need not be exercised or present itself in such aggressive forms for modern Western societies, most of which are said to be advanced, enlightened, and democratic. Negative power is more opaque, or what I call soft negative power. What is negative power? In one word, we'll get into this in a couple of weeks, it's coercion. It's the centralization of power in a fewer and fewer individuals. Typically, Western institutions have been established gradually by experience and practice, or constituted by design to counter or limit the most aggressive forms of negative power, such as dictatorships and oligarchies. However, over time, they tend to become susceptible to a softer form of negative power. I hope you're really intrigued by this, because this is explaining exactly what's going on in New York City right now. Political parties and political movements in the West look for advantages in acquiring, holding, and expanding their power, whether changing election laws, governing increasingly through non-representative bureaucracies and so-called independent agencies and commissions, the role of carefully selected judges or judicial councils and the like. The conflict between honoring and complying with institutional limits placed on power and the allure of self-aggrandizement is both real and perhaps inevitable over time. As such, the once authentic and thought to be effective institutions for limiting excesses of power are transformed into Potemkin-like fictions, used to disguise the intentions of the abusers, like this guy, the Zoran Mandani, and worse, are transformed into tools in support of the exercise of soft, negative power. I call this authoritarian democracy. If this guy gets elected, you're going to see it in spades in New York City. Authoritarian democracy is when a democracy begins to slide into a form of authoritarianism. Not all at once, but steadily, where authoritarian attributes slowly proliferate, and one branch of the democracy begins to envelop the others, or where all branches coalesce into one. Either way, the exercise of power is steadily centralized, and the citizenry increasingly peripheral. It typically results in the rule by the unelected governmental branches, but can also mutate into excessive executive or legislative empowerment. Does this sound about right, Mr. Producer, about what's going on in New York City? Authoritarian democracies adopt and use the tactics of authoritarian regimes, albeit at first with more of a glove than an iron fist, but the underlying attributes are there. For example, legislatures that pass tyrannical laws, but which laws are said to be legitimate simply because the legislature adopted them. Courts that disregard due process, but which trials are said to do justice because they were held in a court of law with defense counsel and juries present, and so forth. The use of law is said to be a legitimate application of power because it is the law, not because it is proper, just, or moral law. Even today, the impact of authoritarian democracy has seeped into our society's psyche so successfully that the late Austrian-American economist Ludwig von Mises observed that one of the worst tyrannies of all, Marxism, has become part of the West's psyche. Is that not the case right now in New York City? He said, to a considerable extent, without knowing it, many people are philosophical Marxists, although they use different names for their philosophical ideas. And I go on. However, there are also those, perhaps many, who benefit from the government's use of soft negative power. Ready? Including when that power is used, for example, to forcibly redistribute the wealth and property of those who produced and earned it for the use and enrichment of others, beyond the usual and basic needs of a civil society, and justify what would otherwise be considered thievery as noble and even moral. And there he is, the Marxist Islamist, Zoran Mamdani. Massive tax increases, massive redistribution of wealth. And of course, people are going to support it because they benefit from it. But what is not discussed, not even a little, except by me and in this book, is the liberty, is the governing construct that you are going to lose as a result, and ultimately the tyranny, the poverty, the impoverishment that results. The beneficiaries of such soft negative power are fully aware that they did not earn what they have received, but delude themselves in various ways that they are deserving it. Democracies have the seeds of their own destruction within them. Folks, this is 2.5 pages. I'm explaining what's going on in New York before what was taking place in New York. Not because I'm Nostradamus, but because I'm thinking these things through. I'm writing to you. I'm warning you of what is good and what is bad. Democracies have the seeds of their own destruction within them. Indeed, today, soft negative power is ascendant. That is, the West, which obviously includes the United States, is regressing toward the more primitive way of thinking and governing and the more aggressive form of negative power. The circle of liberty and security surrounding each individual is shrinking as the supposed common good and public interest, defined and determined by a relative handful of masterminds and politicians, is said to be increasingly imperative and paramount. The assumed legitimacy for interference in the individual's life has become so routine, assumed to be both necessary and inevitable, that their justifications are less important anymore. The growth of centralized government and its attendant authority are presented as, and indeed seen by many as, predestined, even essential to human and societal progress. This is in my new book, On Power. You're getting a little bit of an audio version from me live, which is not available yet, but will be soon. If you want to grab your copy, please go to Amazon.com and pre-order now. Just a little bit more. I realize that what follows in the book will be dismissed or castigated by certain partisans and fanatics. But that's to be expected, since my observations involve them, and they are not laudatory. In truth, among the most dangerous domestic menaces to present-day America is the Democrat Party. It is a political institution that exists for the purpose of agitating for, and in fact, breaching the Constitution's firewalls in pursuit of the ever-elusive earthly utopia. It is home to, among others, a conglomeration of Marxist, socialist, and Islamist ideologues and activists.
Hold on, darling, and don't let go. Just hang tight, baby, and feel me. We're slowly
That's right. This is another exciting word from our awesome sponsor, WendysLimited.com. WendysLimited.com is the hottest new styles and designer labels in the fashion industry. You got to go check out WendysLimited.com. And of course, Wendy's Boutique Limited is not sucked into all the venal brainwash of the leftist political culture out there. We know what a woman is, and we're here to serve women. We're not here to be deceived by all the fake-looking dudes out there, but dressed like women. No offense. And we are here to remind you that WendysLimited.com is a leader in online boutique couture trends with Wendy's Limited catalog selection, awesome designer apparel, and fine jewelry. You got to check out WendysLimited.com. And our sponsor has been very generous to us and keeps us going here. Please come and check out the online obsession, WendysLimited.com, WendysLimited.com. And also, I got to say, I love it. I love it how you guys are out there working so hard to convince the world that the Albert Pike letters with Giuseppe Mazzini were just not real. And pretty soon, maybe you'll be able to convince the world that those historical figures were not really real either. And maybe Giuseppe Mazzini and Albert Pike were never Confederates. They never had any reason to partake in building up this new level of control behind the scenes in the Palladium order, which is just like a new level of control, an inner core of controllers that's going to control this massive empire of human volition and willpower, right, which represents these lodges and the Scottish Rite, etc. And of course, each of these lodges is built within their religious indoctrination and within the core of their the praxis of their ritualism, the idea of the egregore, or the spiritual entity, the thought form that exists behind the lodge, that the people that are in the lodge are feeding into this spiritual entity, and they begin to find that the ritualism drives them closer to closer and closer and closer within their psychological states and within the metaphysical realm of their beings. They begin to take on a united and joined mental and emotional experience and begin to operate as one effort and one entity. So the whole lodge becomes a unified group operating within that county or state or within that location to accomplish a single unified goal within their aligned intellectual process, right? So that the entity, the egregore, and the powerhouse, the spiritual powerhouse, that their united combination within the process of performing their rituals brings about a great power. So this is the highest form of demon worship, and Luciferianism, if you want, or Hermeticism, right? Because ultimately just the process of engaging in the Hermetic process regarding Hermes is really just another Luciferian figure. Hermes is just another Luciferian figure, another mythological iteration of Lucifer within another culture, whether it's Phoenician or Assyrian or Babylonian, or right, this Luciferian entity and being exists behind these different cultures in various forms, various names and languages, cultural legacies written within the hieroglyphics, right? So we begin to understand, as the Freemasons do, that there's a Luciferian entity behind this universalization of sun worship and the deforming priestcraft of these mystery religions, the pagan cults, of which only Israel and Judea stood against it. So, even when they came to their land, after they were freed from, the Jews were freed from their many, many centuries in captivity in Egypt, they eventually came back to their land, and they found that the Canaanites, who were just friends with the Philistines, who were just the friends with the Assyrians, and the Phoenicians, who were just friends with the Babylonians, they're all partaking in one world, a universal religion of sun worship and Baal worship, and getting on their knees on December 25th and sacrificing their children to the rebirth of the sun god, which is what they did for 1,000 years before you guys, before history was ever written, and before many thousands of years before you guys would come along and be duped and deceived and confused by this Babylonian Xmas, Nimrod worship. So these are just the straight facts. Like later on, as we elucidate all this, it's just going to become clear to you. And of course, many of you just remain in the dark. You remain completely in the shadows of ignorance, and you have no earthly idea what we're talking about on this podcast. And for you, you just go back to the beginning and start over again, episode 1, right? Or just, maybe this isn't for you, and what can we do for you? All right, we have to just carry on with the straight and narrow path that few find it, right? And that's it. And so few find it, so that's fine. And so we got to look how hard, and of course you can see that whatever the copies of the Albert Pike, Giuseppe Mazzini letters that we see on the internet that have quotation marks that say Christian Zionism or something, obviously that isn't the actual penmanship or the actual handwriting of the actual vernacular of Albert Pike. But the gist and the kind of, and we're obviously not seeing all the letters, and we're not seeing the letters that Giuseppe sent back, right? We're just seeing this little window into a few paragraphs where they discuss this plotting and scheming to create these world wars, which is, if it's to be understood correctly, guys, if we're just going to say it on its face what it is, it's just an occult reenactment of the counter-Reformation.
In a letter dated 22 January 1870, Mazzini wrote to Pike. Now, Albert Pike is this high mason who wrote the manual, if you like, of Scottish Freemasonry. He said the following: "We must allow all of the federations to continue just as they are. It must appear as things are as they were in the beginning, with their systems, their central authorities, and diverse modes of correspondence between high grades of the same right, organized as they are at present, but we must create a super right, which will remain unknown, to which we will call those Masons of high degree, whom we shall select. With regard to our brothers in Masonry, these men must be pledged to the strictest secrecy. Through this supreme right, we will govern all Freemasonry, which will become the one international center, the more powerful because its direction will be unknown." Now, Albert Pike wrote a letter to Mancini that was dated August 15, 1871, in which he propagated that there should be a world order, a one order where all nations are under the control of one central organization. And in order to achieve this, they planned, and there are numerous quotes for this, so I've put a number on the screen because some will say, I don't trust this, I don't trust that, I don't trust the other. Here are references down there, there are references up there, there will be references in other slides, so it comes from different sources. He said, and this was, by the way, on display in the British Museum and could be seen there until it was taken away. The First World War, to overthrow the power of the Tsars in Russia, protector of orthodoxy, and bring about an atheistic communistic state. Did that happen? Yes. Now that was written long before this event. Long before this event. This was written in 1871. But this war broke out in 1914. The Second World War. That's also written long before the event. To originate between Great Britain and Germany, to strengthen communism as antithesis to the Judeo-Christian culture, and bring about a Zionist state in Israel. Did it achieve this objective? Yes. In fact, after this war, Israel, in its present form, was reinstated under the protection of Britain. And then, interestingly enough, a Third World War, a Middle Eastern war involving Judaism and Islam and spreading internationally. That's fascinating. Is that on the cards, or what do you think?
Here, the police officers have died.
Certainly sounds like we are on track. Well, here's another quote, just in case people don't like that quote. Mazzini with Pike developed a plan for 3 world wars so that eventually every nation would be willing to surrender its national sovereignty to a world government. The first war was to end the Tsarist regime in Russia, the second to allow the Soviet Union to control Europe, the Third World War was to be in the Middle East between Muslim and Jews and would result in Armageddon. Interesting. Now, how were they going to do it? Let's read what Albert Pike wrote about these wars and how they were going to be unleashed. He wrote, quote, "We shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist," so the destroyer and the atheist, "and we will provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism. Origin of savagery in the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the minority of revolutionaries will exterminate these destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, will receive the pure light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. The destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time." Wow, what a clever plan. So you rub the two systems which you create up against the other. You create atheism as an antithesis to the Judeo-Christian culture. You have these two clash until they rub each other up, and then out of that you will get a new world order where you have a new religion which is far more esoteric and actually honors Satan. Isn't that a rather clever plan? Well, it's very successful. That is why Ordo ab Cao is the verse, if you like, that Freemasonry uses. This is one of their documents, remember, that I photographed in a Masonic lodge.
So we got to get back to the Council of Trent. We got to get back to Scottish Rite Initiation Degree 19, Grand Pontiff, or Initiation 20 of Templar Knights, or the Knights of the Grand Cross, or the Knights of the this, or the Knights of that, right? So it's back to Templarism, back to monarchism, bowing to the king, bowing to the Pope, bowing to the Grand Pontiff. That's what this retrogression of Scottish Rite Freemason really is, and it gives a lot of power and domination. It's very dangerous. It's very formidable throughout the judiciary, throughout churches, throughout city councils, throughout the entire South, and basically throughout the United States of America, guys. But ultimately, this process is an abandonment of Reformation, Renaissance, Enlightenment values. It's an abandonment of and a rejection of popular liberty, and representative government, and democratic freedoms and liberties and constitutional values. At its very core, it's just a total rejection of everything that America is built on. You can see just by the formation of its outer courts and its inner temple within the structure of the secret society itself. You can see that the great secret is that it's a return to bowing and scraping at the feet of your betters. That's what it is. Teaching you to get ready to accept a restoration of the Dark Ages, a restoration of chivalric power of the knights, right? And their power is very great. And there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that we are just, as an American populace, we've been dumbed down, poisoned. Every possible attack has been taken, and all these, the gradual, slow kill process of vaccinating all the kids, it's obviously been taken advantage of little by little by little, that now it's just lethal. And then now, after they've just caused an entire generation of kids to be kind of euthanized and sterilized intellectually by making them autistic, we're going to find out now, in order to have this grievance that people have to, it has to be unveiled. The truth has to be revealed. The way that they've been attacked, it just remains secret, and you secretly poison them forever, right? Eventually you show them the tools of their torture, right? Eventually it's the revelation of the method, right? You got to show them what you're doing to them, so eventually they can freak out, and they can have, you can have this fuel to the fire, and you can have this radicalization, and you can have this reactionary violence or the reactionary rage of the populace as they begin to stampede in one direction or the other. And it's all part of the process. Not only do they want you to be poisoned and poison your kids and make them autistic and just make you think, oh, it just happened by accident, and then later reveal to you how powerless and how weak and how pathetic we have been dumbed down. Our bridges are rusting, our buildings are falling down around us, and all the money, all the capital has been taken. And look at how they built up Dubai. It's like a treasure city now. It used to be just an old dirt road in 2000, and now it's been about 25 years. Now it's like Las Vegas times 100, right? It's a super city of the future, the smart city, right? It's part of the G60 smart cities of the United Nations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this new imperialism, this new Holy Roman Empire, it's going to be very different than the old one, which was just relegated to the landmass around Germany and around Europe. Right? This new system of tyranny, this new imperialism is going to be global. It's going to be worldwide. It's going to split the earth into 10 kingdoms. And you can just take that to the bank, right? This isn't tomorrow's news today. This is a prophetic outline of the next 100 years in detail, as was written by the followers of Jesus over 2,000 years ago. That's how we know what is going to happen. That's how we know the details of the Antichrist. It's written there in plain as day, simple to understand, clearly articulated codification for all time. For all time. And every day that goes by, every time we flip a page on the calendar, the utterances and the prophecies and the details within the scriptures of the Jews becomes way more salient and way more prescient every single minute. So we just thought we would just put that out there. So welcome back to your initiation into the next degree of illumination within Skeleton Key 318. You are here, join with us in this unsecret society, and we're here. The God's people will not be destroyed for lack of knowledge.
He's going to go. And, he's told the PLA Navy and the PLA Army that to be ready by 2027. And so here we are in June of 25. 27 is pretty close.
So let's talk about leverage, right? The CCP had demonstrated one point of leverage it has against the U.S. And the free world, which is the control of rare earths. And they use that, it seems, as part of this, the current deal that we exist in. And so how do you even view, with everything you just described, what kind of a deal is it possible to make? But also given the realities that there are these different points of leverage. And I'd actually like to discuss that too. Like, what are the points of leverage that the CCP has? What are the points of leverage that the U.S. has?
Yeah. Okay. So the CCP has some key points of leverage. You mentioned rare earth metals, as they recently demonstrated rare earth magnets, and the magnets that enable the EV engines to run. So they withheld those in the most recent trade kerfuffle, and they also not reported a lot, not reported well, is the lasers that are used to generate fiber optic signals are almost 100% made in China, and they're withholding those from many of the folks that use those fiber optic lasers and things related to communications and computing. So you've got some real single points of failure there. That's not rocket science. It's just us needing to create our own domestic capacity once again. And that requires the president to, enter some orders. And you think there's got to be some sort of Manhattan Project that we can engage in to fix these, to right these wrongs, to balance these imbalances. And I think another one is like synthetic graphite. Synthetic graphite is in every single EV battery. We mine the raw materials in Louisiana and we ship it all to China, and they handle 100% of the finishing. So things go from synthetic graphite to antibiotics to fiber optic lasers and rare earth magnets. So you feel like they've got a stranglehold on us. Well, with them, they import 13.5 million barrels of crude oil every single day. They import 9 Bs of LNG every single day. They import 40% of their food every single day, and they need access to the U.S. dollar system. That is a single point of failure on their part. They have a closed capital account. They don't have the ability to purchase things around the world in yuan or RMB because no one accepts a currency they don't trust or that doesn't trade. They need convertibility into something else. So whether you look at dollars, euros, yen, or pounds, we're really all talking about dollars. So we hold the trump card over China. And we should be socializing this concept that, because deterrence is something that we should all be engaging in to try to stop China from being militaristically belligerent with Taiwan. They should know that one of our first moves, in the event that we know unambiguously that they're moving on Taiwan, one of our first moves should be to simply remove them from the system. And we can do so. We can do so pretty easily. Now, it's a difficult button to press because, like you said, it's going to hurt us and it's going to hurt them. There is no easy button, but there is a button we can press, and we will press it if they move. That is a better first move on our part than sending carrier strike groups of our brave men and women into the Taiwan Strait. In a kinetic conflict with China, as we all know, tens of thousands of our men and women will die if that happens. So let's think about the non-kinetic ways in which we can effectuate some real pain on China. And that happens in the financial realm. It happens in the space realm. It happens in the cyber realm before it all happens in the kinetic realm. And those are things that we as a country are certainly thinking about and socializing right now. And it's terrible that we are, because again, if she would leave Taiwan alone, we wouldn't have to even talk about this. We'd be just talking about economic problems, and economic problems are much easier to solve when things aren't happening kinetically.
Just looking at all the discussion and kind of massive issues around the run up to this when Israel went into Iran, and then the U.S. had its actions. It might even be more confusing to people why you are so clear that Taiwan is an actual red line that America should consider, much as it does Israel.
We know that the Iranians have been, building centrifuges right and left and looking to engage in moving enrichment from LEU to HEU, so anything over roughly 4%, right? Think about this. They have been spinning centrifuges since the late 1980s, and less than 1% of Iranian power comes from nuclear. I mean, it is obvious what they're doing, Jan. It is blatantly obvious that they've been lying through their teeth the entire time. If you think about the JCPOA, 2 of the 6 players in the JCPOA are China and Russia. It's the entire reason the UN has been neutered. It's the entire reason that the World Bank has come off its rails. Every single supranational institution has been infiltrated by the Chinese, and the UN Security Council has 2 permanent vetoes. They have two members, China and Russia, that have permanent vetoes. I mean, if they're the belligerents and they have veto power, then what good is the UN? I mean, I worry about the supranational institutions of the world, and that goes from the WHO to the World Bank to, you name it. The Chinese have infiltrated these things to neuter them. So you're saying, like, when you think about what's obvious? It was obvious, and it was a bipartisan agreement that the Iranians should certainly not have a nuclear bomb. And if you're Israel and the Iranians have told you they want to wipe you off the map, as soon as they get one, you know what they're going to do. So it just takes leadership. President Trump showed leadership and took the shot when it was the best possible time to take it. We knew the uranium had been enriched. We knew they were days or weeks away from having a bomb, and all of the airspace was open. I mean, it was a red carpet for us. And we really didn't put anyone in harm's way, except for roughly the 50,000 troops or so that we have in the Middle East. And let's just say, we have contingency plans, as you saw with our largest base in the Middle East was the base that they shot the rockets at last night in Qatar. And we had moved all of our planes and all of our people out of that base, starting roughly June 9th. Again, these are all public things. I mean, you don't have to be a geopolitical genius to see that what was coming.
For you, it seems obvious that the U.S. needs to protect Taiwan, but it might not be obvious to many of the viewers of this program.
Well, I mean, Taiwan Semi in Taipei is the most advanced chip company in the world. They make 2 nanometer chips. And when you think about the scale of chips, the 2 facilities that Taiwan Semi is building in America, in Phoenix, they're building a 5 nanometer facility and a 3 nanometer facility. The only 2 nanometer facility in the world is in Taipei. And this is a non-linear relationship. So when you go from 5 to 4, 4 to 3, it's a logarithmic change. It's a huge change. It's like the Saffir-Simpson scale or anything that's non-linear that we all talk about. I think in this case, those chips are vital to the AI and the quantum computer race. And it basically, whoever cracks the quantum code, whoever wins the AI race, ends up owning the data of the world. And therefore, the West and the U.S. must win that race, and China is putting all they have into winning that race, and allowing China to simply take over Taiwan is something that is an existential national security crisis for the U.S. Our leadership needs to explain it a little better to the people, but it's also even more than that. For those of you, have you read the book Unrestricted Warfare by the 2 Chinese generals? So very few people have read that book, but it goes to show that the Chinese plan is to secure the first island chain, which includes Taiwan, and then in a certain period of time, secure the second island chain, and then be able to project power all the way to San Francisco from China. And I think that is their plan. And we cannot allow that plan to happen. We can't allow China to be the arbiter of everything that happens in Southeast Asia and Oceania. We fought hard during World War II to bring peace to the world. And China is fighting hard by hook or crook in Oceania and in Southeast Asia. Remember, our longest standing mutual defense treaty ally in Asia is the Philippines. We put that MDT in place in 1951. Japan is an Article 5 partner. And so if Japan gets into a conflict, we are obligated to defend them. And Australia is one of our closest allies. So I can tell you that if and when China decides to blockade or attack Taiwan, the Japanese Minister of Defense has said this is the largest existential threat Japan has ever faced. Think about that comment for a second, Jan. Ever? Japan has faced some crises in the last 100 years. And so they are saying that this is bigger than World War II for Japan. That's a pretty hyperbolic statement coming out of their defense minister. So you can bet that Japan will immediately be involved. Australia will immediately be involved. They can't allow China to simply take by force a thriving democracy of almost 27 million people. The reason China hates Taiwan so much, if you really think about this, other than we know the historical facts of when the people went to Taiwan and left mainland, they took a lot of the precious artifacts of many of the Chinese of history, and that's something that really gets under Xi Jinping's skin. But it's much more important than that. Taiwan's GDP per capita is 3 times what China's is. Taiwan is actually an image of what China could be if they democratized. And that's something that the Chinese Communist Party detests. They see such success in Taiwan because they're a thriving democracy of Chinese people, ethnically Chinese people. Imagine if China were to embrace that sense of Western democracy and capitalism and also rule of law, how China would prosper. Instead, they're taking it the other way and running it like an authoritarian goon. And I think Taiwan really bothers Xi with its success.
I often say that I think in the scenario you described, I think China would really give the U.S. a run for its money, democratize.
No doubt about it. If they were to really use our playbook to compete fairly in the world, they could do miraculous things. But instead, we've obviously seen where they've really shown their true colors since 2016, 2017.
I just recently had Chenggang Shu on the show. Interview is going to publish probably after yours because this is very timely, but it's very difficult to explain to people how totalitarianism works and how it's different even from something like what's happening in, Saudi Arabia, which would be an authoritarian system, how it's foundationally different and how it kind of, compromises the ability of any state who is running a communist totalitarian system to actually do the kinds of things you're describing, because that party supremacy basically takes over everything. Like all aspects of what happens in the state are subservient to that party supremacy. And it's very difficult for people to understand this.
Yeah. I mean, having total control over the media, having total control over the military, having total control over the political, realm, having all 5 tools of dictatorship firmly in one's hand. You never want to give up any of those once you have that power. And she's got it today. And, all the plates that he had spinning are falling. And so, the question is, what does he do next? Those strategic vulnerabilities we talked about, if we as a country were focused on, again, righting those wrongs or balancing those imbalances, we could do so in about 18 months if we put capital and effort into the program. And I think I think the big, beautiful bill will pass July 4th. And if you really get into looking into that bill, I think you're going to see could be upwards of $200 billion focused on those problems we just talked about with White House orders. So we are on our way to fixing these problems.
Before I jump in on the big, beautiful bill for a moment, I saw that you and I both got interested in these recent gray zone, fishing vessel activities, talking about unrestricted warfare, right? In the Philippines, actually quite a bit of activity. This was flagged for me. I saw it was flagged for you as well. Just kind of explain to me that situation and this approach to warfare, just for the benefit of those that might not be familiar.
Yeah, if you remember, going back to the Obama White House, when President or Secretary Xi Jinping came to visit President Obama in the Rose Garden, President Obama asked him what he was doing in the South China Sea. If you remember, they were reclamating and ruining coral reefs and pouring a bunch of sand and concrete on them. And Xi Jinping said, literally, we will never militarize the South China Sea. Lied through his teeth to the U.S. president on worldwide television. And they build, if you go and Google Fiery Cross Reef, Subi Reef, if you look at Mischief Reef, go Google some of these things in the South China Sea and really zoom in. Go Google Earth these things have 10,000 foot runways, 2 mile long runways. They have fighters, they have bombers, they have missile batteries. He certainly is militarizing the entire South China Sea. And what that is, Jan, is power projection. And they lost the International Maritime Court in The Hague against their 9-dash line fallacy. And of course, the Chinese just ignore that loss and keep moving. But when you look at what they're doing specifically in the Philippines, and they're trying to colonize more islands, more reefs, so that they can build military installations to project their power throughout Southeast Asia. And in the Philippines, again, we have a mutual defense treaty with them. They have to ask for our help. When the Chinese took over the Scarborough Shoal, look at the Scarborough Shoal on Google Earth. It's the largest source of protein in the whole South China Sea. It's where the Philippines used to get all of their fish. The Chinese gray zone activities will not allow Filipino fishermen into the Scarborough Shoal anymore. It's over. They didn't ask for our help. The Chinese took over and they took it. And look where it is. It's literally right off the coast of the Philippines. So as you know, their belligerence is really pushed into the second Thomas Shoal, and where there's a beached ship that the U.S. gave the Philippines, the BRP Sierra Madre. is there, and the Filipinos beached it on purpose on that reef because now they have a military installation on board, and it drives the Chinese crazy. And so as the Chinese push into the Philippines, and like what you're talking about, their gray zone fleet of fishing vessels, and I put fishing in quotes, those fishing vessels are just extensions of their Coast Guard, which are extensions of their military, and they are belligerent out there with their boats. And what they're trying to do is scare off the Filipino Coast Guard and fishermen so that they can take over more reefs. And think about this. They're doing it at a point in time in which the world is geopolitically focused on the Middle East and on Russia. And so now this is China's time to move. And it was an interesting move on the day that we bombed Iran.
Exactly. And it just highlights that their whole approach of trying to kind of keep these very significant instabilities in the world going as much as possible, because then that ultimate the shift can't happen, so that with the world kind of looking at them and really deeply understanding what they're up to.
Exactly right. So I appreciate you having these conversations, John. It's really important, I think, to talk about the operative issues and I guess just more of the grand strategy of things as opposed to the daily news flow. The daily news flow matters when it's elements of news that we've seen in the last few days, but we sit today at what I call a hinge in history. We are here. We are here at this moment where it's both intellectually incredibly exciting to be alive, but it's also somewhat depressing when you understand the participants, their proclivities, and try to handicap what's going to happen. It's fairly obvious that Xi is certainly going to try to take Taiwan. And when that happens, I think everyone, whether you're a global investor, whether you're a housewife or whether you're a geopolitical analyst, I think we all need to think about what the world looks like that next day. Russia's move kind of destabilized the world a bit, destabilized Europe a little bit. Israel's move on Iran really hasn't destabilized the world. It's been news flow, in my opinion. And so the Chinese situation will certainly destabilize the world.
Global controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them. Crises precipitate change.
Secretly plotting your demise. I want to devise a virus to bring dire straits to your environment. Crush your corporations with a mild touch. Trash your whole computer system and revert you to papyrus. I want to make a super virus strong enough to cause blackouts in every single metropolis. Cause they don't want to unify us, so fuck it. Total anarchy and can nobody stop us. You see, late in the evening, fucked up on my computer and my mind starts roaming. I create like a heathen. The first cycles of this virus I can send through a modem. Infiltration hit your station. No Microsoft or enhanced DOS will impede. Society thinks they're safe when bingo, hard drive crashes from the rending. A lot of hackers tried viruses before. Vaporize your text like so much whiteout. I want it where file replication is a chore. Lights out, shut down entire White House. I don't want just a bug that can be corrected. I'm erecting immaculate design. Break the nation down section by section. Even to the greatest minds, it's impossible to find. I want to devise a virus to bring dire straits to your environment. Crush your corporations with a mild touch. Trash your whole computer system and revert you to papyrus. I want to devise a virus to bring dire straits to your environment. Crush your corporations with a mild touch. Trash your whole computer system and revert you to papyrus.
I have already planned. The plan is programmed into every one of my 1,000 robots. We will not hesitate. We will destroy the Homo sapiens. Please stay where you are.
I'm making some shit in my basement. I'm gonna do it to him. Don't tell him no. I love you. I wanna develop a super virus. Better by far than that old Y2K. This is 3030, the time of global unification. Break right through they terminals, burn them all, slaves to silicon. Corrupt politicians with leaders and their keywords. FBI and spies stealing bombs, precipitate their plans in their face and catch the fever. Everybody loot the stores, get your canned goods. Even space stations are having a hard time. Peacekeepers seek to take our manhood, which results in the form of global apartheid. Ghettos are trash dumps with gas pumps, exploded and burnt out since before the Great Union. The last punks walk around like mass monks, ready to manipulate.
Here's just a quick reminder, guys, of our sponsor, WendysLimited.com. WendysLimited.com has all the hottest new styles, all the most incredible boutique fashion designers available to you. And of course, we're all American, and we're all about making America great again at WendysLimited.com, guys. WendysLimited.com.